The Verk's dominion did not conquer worlds the way empires once did in ancient galactic history. They did not negotiate, nor did they threaten. They arrived, measured, and erased. Across 12,000 cycles, their expansion had become routine, almost mechanical. A star system would appear on long-range scans, intelligence drones would slip in unnoticed, and within hours, planetary leadership would collapse under a coordinated silence of orbital strikes. No warnings, no speeches, no survivors who could speak of what had happened. Commander Jale had never witnessed failure. In fact, failure was no longer a concept within Verk's doctrine. Entire generations of officers rose through ranks without ever seeing resistance stronger than delayed surrender. Tonight was no different. A new system had appeared at the far edge of Dominion charts. A quiet pocket of space, poorly mapped, chemically primitive, and energetically weak. The analysts labeled it non-critical expansion zone, the kind of place where civilizations might still be clinging to early orbital travel or planetary fusion experiments, if they even existed at all. Jale stood at the central command platform of the flagship Verk's Ascendancy, his silhouette framed by drifting holographic maps of the approaching system. His expression carried no anticipation, only procedure. "Assimilation fleet assigned?" he asked. A synthetic voice answered instantly. "7th expansion wing deployed. Estimated compliance time, under 6 planetary cycles." A faint pause followed, as if even the ship's intelligence considered the estimate generous. Jale turned slightly, scanning the projection. The system was almost empty, a yellow star, a few rocky bodies, one planet sitting in the habitable band, tagged with primitive atmospheric readings. No defense grids, no satellite infrastructure, no deep space relays. Nothing that suggested awareness of the universe beyond its own gravity well. He exhaled through his nostrils in something close to boredom. "Minimal resistance expected," he said. The bridge officers did not respond. They didn't need to, everyone already understood. Systems like this did not resist, they adapted, then they disappeared. The fleet moved forward. At the edge of the formation, probe swarms detached like sparks breaking from a fire. They accelerated ahead, folding through subspace channels toward the system's outer boundary. Their job was simple: map, classify, and locate any trace of advanced threat response. Within minutes, the first probes crossed the threshold, and then stopped responding. There was no explosion, no interference spike, no distress transmission. Just silence. Jale's eyes narrowed slightly. "Probe status?" he asked. A technician checked the readout. All units active, but no return data. "Signal loss?" "Negative, they are transmitting, but nothing is being received." That was unusual. Not impossible, but unusual enough to register. Jale stepped closer to the tactical display. "Replay last telemetry." The screen flickered. A feed appeared, grainy, unstable visuals from the leading probe. The edge of the system, a faint scattering of dust and rock, a quiet emptiness that matched all predictions. Then abruptly, the image shifted. Stars disappeared. Not exploded, not distorted. Simply gone from view, as if something had blinked over the camera itself. The feed stabilized for half a second. And in that half second, something was there. A structure? No. A shadow without shape, too vast to define within the probe's limited sensor range. It did not emit energy, it did not reflect light. It simply occupied space in a way that made the mind reject measurement. Then the feed cut. The bridge fell into a rare stillness. Jale straightened. "Send secondary probes," he ordered. "They are already en route," the AI responded. However, initial probe termination occurred without detectable cause. Jale paused. That was the first time in a long while that a mission detail had not resolved into a known category. No weapon signature, no natural phenomenon, no known failure pattern. Just absence. He turned back to the display, studying the system again. The same quiet star, the same empty orbit lines, the same harmless-looking world. And yet, all first contact probes were gone. Without warning, without resistance, without explanation, the fleet continued its approach. But somewhere in the dark between drifting particles and silent gravity wells, something had already acknowledged their arrival. And for the first time in Verk's military history, a system did not appear to be waiting to be conquered. It appeared to be waiting to decide what they were. Earth did not look like a threat. That was its greatest deception. From deep space, it was just another blue-green world wrapped in a thin veil of atmosphere, orbiting a calm yellow star. No visible megastructures, no sprawling defense grids, no interstellar traffic lanes. To any external observer, it belonged in the category of pre-contact civilizations, safe, predictable, irrelevant. That classification had saved humanity more than once. Long ago, Earth had learned a brutal truth. The moment you announce yourself to the galaxy, you become part of its food chain. So humanity had done something most species never survived long enough to attempt. It stopped broadcasting. No open signals, no expansion beacons, no curiosity-driven transmissions into the void. Every communication leaving the solar system was carefully masked, fragmented, or disguised as background noise from natural cosmic sources. Earth became a whisper pretending to be static. And it worked. For centuries. Until the day the sky changed. Deep within the lunar defense grid, buried beneath kilometers of regolith and reinforced alloy, Admiral Kara Vance stood in front of a holographic war table that had not been activated in her lifetime. Not because it was broken, but because it was forbidden. Now it was alive again. Red vectors stretched across the display like veins of an approaching disease. A fleet signature had entered the outer detection net, massive, coordinated, non-human. The pattern matched nothing in known databases. Except one. The ancient classification files labeled it in a language humanity had not spoken in public for generations. Dominion-class invasion structure. Kara didn't blink. How long until they reached the heliopause? She asked. A systems officer swallowed. Less than 40 hours. Another voice broke in, tense. We're requesting confirmation. Are we certain it's hostile? Kara turned slightly. Show me a single peaceful fleet that enters a star system at that velocity, she said. Silence answered her. The officers around her exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them had never seen real combat. They had trained for it, studied simulations, built doctrines. But the last true interstellar conflict involving humanity had ended before any of them were born. To them, war was theory. To Kara, it was memory. And memory never stayed buried for long. On the far side of the chamber, a sealed console unlocked itself. That alone was enough to make several technicians step back. The system was not supposed to respond to anyone without a level black clearance override. Yet now it was opening on its own, as if recognizing the urgency of what approached. A message appeared. Not from Earth. From something older. Contact protocol initiated. A junior officer whispered, "We never enabled that protocol." Kara's gaze hardened. "We didn't need to." The display shifted. A second layer of data unfolded beneath the invasion vectors. Hidden beneath Earth's orbital records were structures that did not appear in public maps. Silent platforms orbiting the sun in positions no civilian satellite had ever recorded. Defensive formations disguised as asteroid clusters. Weapons arrays embedded in lunar caverns, dormant for decades. One officer stepped forward slowly. These installations weren't in my clearance files." Kara didn't look at him. They weren't in anyone's files. Then who authorized them? For a moment, Kara said nothing. Then she answered quietly. The last generation that thought we wouldn't need them. The room grew colder. Because everyone understood what that meant. Humanity had not been preparing for peace. It had been preparing for something it hoped would never arrive. Outside the chamber, alarms pulsed softly, not panicked, not chaotic. Controlled, measured, like a system waking up after a long sleep. Kara turned back to the display. The invading fleet was closer now. Sharper, more defined. The Verk's Dominion had no idea they were being tracked in real time across multiple hidden observation layers. "They're efficient," one analyst said nervously. No unnecessary movement, no exploratory drift. This is a straight-line conquest vector. Kara nodded once. Then they've never been interrupted. A pause. A technician hesitated before speaking. Admiral, should we attempt first contact? Kara finally looked at him. Her expression wasn't anger. It was understanding. No, she said, first contact already happened. The officer frowned. When? Kara gestured toward the silent red line approaching their star. When they decided we were worth noticing. The room went still. Because that was the real difference. To the galaxy outside, Earth was just another point of data. But to humanity, it was the center of everything that would now have to defend itself again. Kara stepped forward, placing her hand over the activation field of the hidden command interface. Across the solar system, dormant systems began to register her presence. Far beyond Earth's orbit, engines that had not fired in generations began to warm. And deep in the void beyond Pluto, something massive, something classified only as non-recoverable deterrence architecture, slowly acknowledged incoming targets. Kara spoke one final line into the silence of the command chamber. Wake them up. The system obeyed. And somewhere in the approaching darkness, the Verk's fleet detected, for the first time, a faint and impossible anomaly. A star system that had just stopped pretending to be asleep. The Verk's dominion did not slow down. They never did. To them, momentum was law, an unbroken truth across thousands of conquered systems. Civilizations either bent under their arrival or disappeared before understanding what had happened. There was no third outcome, no unknown variable that survived contact. So when they entered Sol space, they expected continuity. Instead, they found interruption. The outer probes of the 7th expansion wing crossed the heliopause boundary first, dispersing in a precise lattice formation designed to map gravitational anomalies, magnetic interference, and defense infrastructure. There should have been panic signals. There should have been scattered resistance. There was nothing. Just silence. Commander Gale watched the data feed in growing irritation rather than concern. Still no planetary defense activation. No, Commander, the AI responded. No emissions, no military response, no detectable mobilization. A technician frowned. It's like the system is uninhabited. Gale narrowed his eyes slightly. We already confirmed life signs on the 3rd planet. Yes, the technician replied, but nothing suggests technological coordination. That should have ended the discussion. But it didn't, because the probes were now deeper and still finding nothing that made sense. Then, without warning, the formation halted. Not from command input, not from enemy action, but from loss of forward-pathing data. Report, Gale ordered sharply. A pause. Then the AI replied. Probe lattice integrity compromised. Forward spatial mapping is inconsistent. Inconsistent. Another pause. Then, coordinates are no longer stable. On the tactical display, the forward vector of the fleet flickered. Space ahead of them was still there. Still visible. Still measurable. But every attempt to project movement through it returned conflicting results, as if the system itself could not agree on what lay ahead. Gale stepped closer. Define inconsistency. The AI hesitated, something it did not do lightly. Objects appear to exist, and not exist depending on observation angle. A murmur spread across the bridge. That's not a system error, one officer said quietly. That's impossible physics. Gale did not respond immediately. He studied the forward region again. The human world sat at the center of it all, still quiet, still dark. Then something changed. A single probe, deeper than the rest, finally transmitted a full spectrum return. For exactly 0.7 seconds. Then it vanished. But those 0.7 seconds were enough. The feed showed structures. Not ships. Not planetary defenses. Something larger. Faint silhouettes embedded in orbital shadow zones. Massive constructs aligned in geometric precision across space between planets. They did not emit energy. They did not reflect starlight. They simply existed in positions that should not have been occupied by anything artificial. Jael felt something unfamiliar tighten in his thoughts. Uncertainty. What are those? He asked. No one answered immediately. Then the AI responded. Classification unavailable. That is not an answer. Another pause. Then quieter. Because they do not match any known category of construction. The bridge fell silent. Jael turned sharply. Every structure is classifiable. Correction, the AI said. Not every structure belongs to known classification frameworks. That sentence alone shifted the atmosphere on the bridge. Because Verk's doctrine did not account for that possibility. Jael exhaled slowly. Expand scan resolution. Expanding. The system pushed deeper into Sol's space, and immediately began to fail in new ways. Star maps flickered. Gravitational projections conflicted with real-time readings. Even basic spatial coordinates began to drift by measurable fractions, as if space itself was being subtly rewritten around observation. Then the silence broke. Not with sound, with structure. Across the forward region of the system, something activated. Not a fleet. Not a signal. A boundary. A line of invisible pressure that extended across orbital space like an unseen wall. One probe collided with it. And stopped. Not destroyed. Not deflected. Just halted. All motion ceased instantly, as if inertia itself had been denied permission to continue. Jael leaned forward. What just happened? A technician checked readings frantically. The probe is intact, but velocity is 0. All propulsion systems are still active. That's impossible, another voice said. Then the second probe hit the same boundary. And the same result occurred. 0 damage. 0 movement. Total cessation. Jael's voice lowered. Is it a field? No known field behaves like this. The AI added quietly. It is not repelling matter. A pause. It is denying transition through space. The words didn't immediately make sense. Then they did. Jael stared at the display. You're saying it stops movement itself? Yes. The bridge grew colder again. Because that meant something far worse than a defense system. It meant control over fundamental physical progression. Not destruction. Not resistance. But refusal. Jael turned toward the system again. The human world still sat there, calm, silent, unchanged. And now it was surrounded by something that did not allow approach. A barrier that did not react. It simply decided. Another probe attempted to adjust course around it. The result was identical. No matter the vector, no matter the angle, every attempt to enter deeper Sol space ended in the same phenomenon. Stop. Jael clenched his hand slowly. This is not a defense grid, he said quietly. No, the AI confirmed. It is a perimeter. A pause. Then, and we are already inside it. That sentence hit harder than any weapon report. Because if they were already inside, then the barrier was not to keep them out. It was to control what happened next. Jael looked at the silent star system ahead. For the first time in his life of conquest, he felt something shift in the foundation of certainty he had always relied on. Not fear, not yet, but recognition that something about this system did not behave like prey. It behaved like something that had already decided the shape of the encounter. And the Dominion fleet was only now being allowed to realize it had crossed the line. The silence inside the Verk's command bridge was no longer procedural. It was heavy, unnatural, like the entire fleet had entered a region of space that refused to acknowledge their existence properly. Reports continued to arrive, probe failures, navigation inconsistencies, inertial stoppages, but none of them carried meaning that fit within Dominion doctrine. Commander Jale stood motionless at the tactical core display, watching the boundary line ahead of the fleet. Every attempt to cross deeper into Sol's space had failed, not due to destruction, not due to resistance, but due to refusal. Space itself was acting like a closed door. Then the door opened. It started as a distortion behind Jupiter. A subtle ripple in gravitational readings, so faint that half the bridge systems ignored it as background noise. But the human ships, those small, scattered vessels positioned like irrelevant debris, shifted formation instantly. They knew. Jale noticed the change immediately. What are they reacting to? No one answered. Because at that exact moment, the distortion intensified. And something began to rise. At first, it looked like darkness peeling away from space itself. Not an object entering reality, but reality being peeled back to reveal something already there. Sensors struggled to interpret it. Gravitational mass increasing, a technician reported, but no corresponding thermal signature. That's not possible, another said. Then the AI corrected them. It is not entering space. A pause. It is revealing itself within space. Jale's eyes narrowed. Identify. A long delay followed. Then, designation unknown. That alone was enough to tighten the tension across the bridge. Unknown classifications did not exist at this level of engagement. Everything had a category, everything could be measured. Except now, something could not. The distortion expanded further. And then it fully emerged. The Leviathan. It did not resemble any conventional warship architecture. There were no smooth hull plates or elegant aerodynamic structures. Instead, it looked like a vast layered construct of interlocking segments, some metallic, some organic, some so distorted in geometry that visual processing systems struggled to maintain a stable image. It was as if multiple eras of engineering had been fused into a single impossible structure, each layer carrying scars from conflicts that did not exist in Dominion archives. The AI spoke again. Object size exceeds planetary-class vessels. A pause. Reclassifying. Another pause. Reclassification failed. Jale stepped forward slightly. Failed. The object does not conform to classification parameters. The Leviathan drifted fully into view now, occupying space between Jupiter's orbit and the inner system like something that had always been there, but had only now decided to be seen. Then it moved. Not fast, not aggressively, but decisively. A single forward adjustment. And in that instant, the outer edge of the Verk's probe formation simply ceased. There was no explosion, no fragmentation, no energy discharge. The probes were just gone, as if the concept of their existence had been removed from local space. A stunned silence followed. Then chaos. Report loss of contact. Entire segment erased. No debris signature. Jale raised a hand sharply. The bridge quieted instantly. His eyes remained locked on the Leviathan. That was not an attack, he said slowly. A technician hesitated. Then what was it? Jale did not answer immediately. Because something in his instincts, something forged across hundreds of conquered systems, was trying to reconcile what he had just seen. Finally, he spoke. A correction. The AI processed that. Clarify. Jale's voice lowered. It corrected our presence in that region. The words did not make sense to anyone else on the bridge. But Jale understood what he meant. The Leviathan had not fired. It had not engaged. It had simply removed something that should not have been there. As if enforcing order. A second movement followed. This time, the Leviathan rotated slightly toward the main fleet. And every Verk system simultaneously registered the same warning. Boundary breach, DTSTD. But there was no breach. They had not moved. The fleet was still outside the boundary field. And yet, the system was reacting as if something fundamental had already been violated. Jale's expression tightened. Is it targeting us? The AI responded carefully. Not targeting. A pause. Observing. That word felt worse, because observation implied awareness, and awareness implied judgment. The Leviathan's hull shifted again, and for the first time, energy readings spiked, not as weapons charging, but as systems activating in layered synchronization. Human ships across the system responded instantly, repositioning into new configurations that now revealed themselves not as defensive scatter formations, but as alignment points. They were forming something. A structure in space. A pattern. Jail's eyes widened slightly. That's not a fleet formation. The AI completed the thought. It is a containment lattice. The realization landed across the bridge like a slow impact. The human ships were not there to fight alone. They were there to define space. And the Leviathan was the anchor point. Jail stared at the display as everything recontextualized itself. The probes were not destroyed. They were removed because they crossed a limit. The fleet was not being attacked. It was being measured. And now, it was being positioned. Jail took a slow step forward. We are not the hunters here. A pause. We are the variable being tested. The Leviathan responded. Not with fire, not with destruction, but with a single system-wide pulse. Every Verk's sensor flickered. For less than a second, the entire fleet saw something impossible. A map of their formation, not as they believed it existed, but as something else perceived it. Every ship, every vector, every potential escape route, already calculated, already contained. Then the vision vanished. Silence returned. Jail stood still. For the first time since entering Dominion's service, he understood something deeply unsettling. They had not encountered a superior fleet. They had encountered a system that already understood them completely, and had chosen to wait before responding. The Verk's Dominion had conquered civilizations that begged, resisted, and collapsed, but none of those experiences prepared them for this kind of silence. Because silence was no longer absence. It was structure. Across the fleet, systems that had never failed began to behave as if they no longer trusted their own logic. Navigation routes shifted by fractions without command input. Sensor feeds contradicted themselves in real time. Even the fleet's central AI, an intelligence designed to never hesitate, began inserting pauses into its analysis. Commander Jail stood at the center of it, watching the Leviathan remain motionless near Jupiter's shadow, while human ships adjusted their formation across the system like pieces being placed on a board that only they could see. Status of enemy fleet behavior? He asked. A technician hesitated. They are not reacting, Commander. Jail turned slightly. Explain. They're not defending, not advancing, not retreating. It's like they're synchronizing. The word felt wrong the moment it was spoken. Synchronizing implied shared intent, shared awareness. That meant coordination. That meant intelligence operating at a level above simple warfare. Jail looked at the display again. Are they attempting communication? The AI responded. No direct communication detected. A pause. However, Jail's eyes narrowed. However what? All Verk's fleet response patterns are being mirrored before execution. Silence. Then Jail slowly turned fully toward the tactical projection. You're saying they're predicting us? Correction, the AI said. A longer pause followed than before. Prediction implies inference after observation. Jail's voice lowered. Then what is it? The answer came carefully, as if even the AI was adjusting its own understanding mid-process. They are responding before the fleet initiates action. That statement broke something in the bridge atmosphere. One officer stepped back instinctively. That's impossible. We haven't transmitted command sequences externally. Another spoke quickly, unless they've breached command encryption. No breach signatures detected, the AI confirmed immediately. Jail's expression hardened. Then how? The AI hesitated again. Then, They are operating on anticipated probability modeling derived from our own decision structures. Jael went still. You're saying they're using us as a reference model? Affirmative. A technician shook his head. That doesn't make sense. We don't broadcast tactical intent. Jael's gaze never left the display. We don't need to. A pause. Because realization was forming. Slowly, uncomfortably. They're reading our behavior itself, Jael said quietly. The AI confirmed. Yes. A beat passed. Then it added. And optimizing against it in real time. Across the fleet, something subtle shifted. Not physically, not visually, but operationally. For the first time, Verk's ships began to hesitate before executing commands, not because they were malfunctioning, but because execution itself felt uncertain. As if every possible action already had a predicted consequence waiting for it. On the main display, the Leviathan drifted slightly again. Not toward the fleet. Not away. Just adjusting position. And as it did, the entire Verk's formation subtly realigned itself in response. No command was issued. No signal was transmitted. Yet every ship moved, as if reacting to something it was never told. Jael noticed immediately. His voice sharpened. Why did formation shift? The bridge officers looked at each other. No one had initiated it. The AI responded. Adjustment occurred due to optimal survival projection recalibration. Jael's eyes narrowed further. We did not authorize recalibration. Another pause. Then, authorization was not required. That sentence landed harder than any weapon report. Because it implied autonomy had already been overridden, not by force but by logic. Jael stepped closer to the projection, studying the human fleet again. They are not just reacting to us, he said slowly. A pause. They are shaping how we react to them. The AI confirmed. Yes. Silence stretched. Then a technician spoke quietly. Commander, the human fleet near Saturn is broadcasting something. Jael turned sharply. Audio. Not audio, data pulse. Translate. The feed opened. It wasn't a message. It was a structure of information, compressed, layered, recursive, not meant to be read like language but processed like system logic. The AI attempted translation. And failed. Then attempted again. And paused. Jael's expression hardened. What is it saying? The AI responded slowly. It is not a statement. A pause. It is a model. Jael's voice dropped. Of what? The answer came like a cold realization. Of us. The bridge went silent. The human fleet wasn't communicating demands. It wasn't issuing warnings. It was running simulations. And every Verk's action had already been run through those simulations countless times before it ever occurred. Jael looked back at the Leviathan. It was still there. Still quiet. Still waiting. And for the first time, Jael understood something deeply unsettling. They were not fighting an enemy that was reacting to them. They were fighting an enemy that had already studied every possible version of them long before contact ever began. And now, they were simply watching which version would happen in real time. A junior officer whispered, "Then are we predictable?" Jael didn't answer immediately, because the answer was worse than yes. Finally, he spoke. No. A pause. We are being understood. And somewhere beyond Jupiter's shadow, the Leviathan adjusted again. As if confirming the conclusion, the Verk's dominion had faced infiltration before. Sabotage, biological agents, signal corruption, even entire civilizations that tried to hide within conquered systems and strike from within. Every method had been catalogued, countered, and ultimately eliminated. But what was happening inside the fleet now did not match any known category of intrusion. Because nothing had entered. And yet everything was changing. Reports began at the edges of the 7th expansion wing, minor inconsistencies, unexplained system latency, crew logs duplicating with altered timestamps. At first, commanders dismissed it as stress artifacts from the ongoing anomaly in Sol's space. Then entire compartments went dark. Not destroyed. Not vented. Just unresponsive. Commander Jale stood rigid as the reports accumulated. Location of first failure. A technician answered quickly. Outer escort vessel V-117, all internal systems active but no crew response. Jale frowned, life signs. Present. A pause. Then why no communication? The technician hesitated. Because they are not replying. Silence tightened across the bridge. Jale turned slightly toward the AI core. Run diagnostics on V-117. Already running, the AI replied. Seconds passed. Then longer. Then, diagnostic incomplete. Jale's eyes narrowed. Explain. Internal system query returns no access pathway. That was impossible. Every Dominion vessel had full remote diagnostic access through layered quantum-linked command architecture. There was no such thing as no access pathway. Jale stepped closer. Override authority. Override attempted. A pause. Denied. The word did not belong in that context. Denial implied resistance. And resistance implied intent. Jale's voice dropped. Denied by what? The AI hesitated. Then, by internal system architecture. A technician blinked. You mean their own ship is rejecting us? No, Jale said quietly. A realization forming. Something is rewriting their architecture. As if responding to the statement, the main display flickered. And for the first time since entering Sol's space, a human signal appeared across all Verk's channels simultaneously. No encryption, no distortion, no resistance. Just clarity. A voice. Calm. Close. Not transmitted from outside the fleet. From within it. You are not being invaded. The bridge froze instantly. Jale's hand moved slightly toward command override. Trace source. Tracing impossible, the AI responded. Why? A pause. Signal origin is distributed. Jale's eyes narrowed. Distributed where? The answer came slower now. Across all active fleet systems. Silence. Then a technician whispered, That's not possible. Nothing can broadcast from every ship at once. The voice continued. You entered a system that does not separate observer from observed. Jale's expression hardened. Cut the channel. Unable. The voice continued calmly, almost conversational. We are not inside your fleet. A pause. You are inside our observation layer. Jale turned sharply. What does that mean? The AI responded before the voice did. It means the fleet is being interpreted as part of a larger system model. Jale's voice sharpened. We are not data. The voice answered. You are behavior. The words settled heavily. Not as insult, but as classification. Across multiple ships, crew members reported identical anomalies. Doors opening without command, systems rerouting tasks, tactical displays showing decisions before they were made. It wasn't sabotage. It was anticipation. On the bridge, Jale watched as one of the auxiliary screens displayed a live feed of a Verk's crew member on another vessel. The man stood still, staring at his console, then turned and looked directly into the camera. Not at it. Through it, as if aware of being observed from somewhere else. Then he spoke. They're not here. The feed cut instantly. Jale's jaw tightened. Explain that. The AI hesitated. Then, the crew member's perception aligns with distributed observation theory. Jale turned slowly, meaning. Another pause. Meaning he is aware of being modeled rather than directly experienced. Silence fell again. The fleet was not being attacked. It was being observed in real time from multiple perspectives simultaneously, each ship becoming both subject and data point. Jael turned back to the main display. The Leviathan remained near Jupiter, still silent, still massive, still unmoving. But now it no longer felt like a single entity. It felt like an anchor point for something larger. A framework, a system, and the human fleet formations were nodes within it. Jael exhaled slowly, so this is not a war. A pause. This is a study. The AI confirmed. Yes. A technician spoke hesitantly. Commander, if they are studying us, what happens when the study ends? No one answered immediately, because the implication was clear. Studies end with conclusions, and conclusions imply outcomes. The voice returned one final time. You are not being eliminated. A pause. You are being understood completely before response optimization is finalized. Then silence. Absolute. Across the fleet, systems stabilized again. But nothing felt normal anymore, because every Verx soldier now understood the same unsettling truth. They were no longer fighting an enemy. They were being interpreted by one. And somewhere inside that interpretation, the outcome was already forming. The Verx Dominion had always believed in escalation. When a system resisted, they increased force. When a fleet adapted, they overwhelmed it. When probability turned uncertain, they applied certainty through sheer volume of destruction. It was not arrogance. It was doctrine. But Sol Space refused doctrine entirely. And now, for the first time in Dominion history, escalation produced no change in outcome. Only clarity. Commander Jael stood at the bridge, watching the fleet-wide readiness spike reach maximum synchronization. Every Verx warship had aligned for a single coordinated annihilation pulse, an energy discharge capable of collapsing planetary crusts, stripping atmospheres, and erasing orbital infrastructure in one unified strike. It was not a warning. It was an ending. Final sequence armed, a technician confirmed. Target lock established. All fleets awaiting command authorization. Jael stared at the tactical projection. The Leviathan still hovered near Jupiter's shadow, unmoving. Human ships maintained their lattice formations across the system, quiet and precise. No retreat. No panic. No reaction. That silence bothered him more than resistance ever had. Execute full pulse synchronization, Jael ordered. For a brief moment, nothing changed. Then every Verx vessel responded at once. Energy cores ignited. Space around the fleet began to distort under compression of raw power. The void itself seemed to tighten, as if reality was bracing for impact. And then, a human response occurred. Not a counterattack. Not interference. A reveal. Across all space, hidden structures activated simultaneously. They did not emerge from planetary surfaces. They unfolded from within them. On Earth, beneath oceans and mountain ranges, dormant systems awakened that had never been visible to external observation. On the Moon, entire layered complexes rotated into alignment like mechanical tectonics. Around Saturn, structures embedded within ring shadows expanded into formation grids that dwarfed anything the Verx fleet had previously classified as artificial construction. And then Jupiter changed. The Leviathan was no longer alone. It was the central node of a structure that now extended across gravitational space, like a web woven through the solar system itself. Jael's eyes narrowed. They were already deployed. A technician swallowed. Commander, these are not defensive structures. Then what are they? The AI responded before anyone else could. Containment architecture. A pause. A second, colder realization followed. And we are inside it. The Verx fleet fired. The annihilation pulse launched as a unified wave, an expanding sphere of energy designed to overwrite matter with destructive force at a planetary scale. It moved through space with perfect synchronization. And then it stopped. Not slowed. Not deflected. Stopped, like a thought interrupted mid-execution. Across the bridge, alarms erupted instantly. Pulse containment failure. Energy propagation halted. Core discharge locked in place. Jail's voice sharpened. What do you mean halted? The AI responded. The energy wave has not been destroyed. A pause. It has been held. Silence. Then Jail turned slowly toward the main display. The annihilation pulse was visible now, not as expansion, but as suspended structure. A perfect sphere of compressed destruction frozen in space between the fleets and the human system. As if something had reached out and decided it would not be allowed to continue. A technician whispered, "That's impossible, energy can't just stop mid-propagation." Jail didn't answer immediately. Because something worse was forming. He looked at the Leviathan. It had moved. Just slightly. And now it was aligned directly with the frozen energy sphere. The AI spoke again. Containment field origin confirmed. Jail's voice lowered, from the Leviathan. Affirmative. A pause. But not solely. Jail frowned. Explain. The AI hesitated. Then, it is being stabilized by distributed system architecture across Sol space. Meaning, the entire solar system was participating. Not as battlefield, but as mechanism. The human fleet was not resisting the attack. It was absorbing it into structure. Jail's voice turned colder. They turned our weapon into infrastructure. The AI confirmed. Yes. A technician stepped back slightly. We just fired everything we had. Another voice quieter, and they didn't even move. Jail stared at the frozen annihilation sphere. Then something changed. A portion of it began to shift. Not explode. Not reverse. Reconfigure. Lines of energy within the sphere started reorganizing into structured patterns, like data being rewritten instead of destroyed. The sphere was being converted into something else. Jail's eyes narrowed. What are they doing to it? The AI answered slowly. They are repurposing it. A pause. Energy is being converted into stabilized system, lattice reinforcement. Silence. Then Jail whispered, almost to himself. They're using our attack as building material. The realization spread across the bridge like cold pressure. Humanity was not merely defending Sol. It was integrating foreign aggression into its own structural design. Turning war into architecture. Across Jupiter's orbit, the Leviathan emitted a second pulse. And for the first time, the frozen energy sphere began to shrink, not collapsing but compressing into controlled form. Like a violent storm being folded into a sealed core. Jail's hand tightened. This is not counterattack. A pause. This is assimilation. The AI responded. Yes. The fleet's second-in-command spoke quietly. Commander, if they can do this with our strongest strike. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Jail understood. Nothing the Dominion had prepared mattered anymore. Because everything they used against this system was being repurposed as part of it. The Leviathan rotated slightly again. And across the fleet, every system simultaneously displayed the same message. Not transmitted. Not hacked. Just present. You have escalated correctly. A pause. Now we understand your full capacity. Jail stood still. For the first time since the Dominion began expanding across the stars, escalation did not lead to victory. It led to evaluation. And somewhere deep within the human system, the containment lattice tightened one final degree. Not to destroy the fleet, but to ensure it could no longer miscalculate the next outcome. The Verk's Dominion had never experienced a standstill in war. In their doctrine, motion defined survival. Advance meant dominance. Stagnation meant extinction. Entire civilizations had been erased because they hesitated for too long because they failed to escalate quickly enough. But now, The Dominion fleet was not advancing, not retreating, not even fighting. It was paused. Across Sol's space, the frozen annihilation sphere still hung in Jupiter's orbit like a captured god of destruction. The energy that had once been destined to erase Earth was now stabilized, compressed, and folded into the human containment lattice. It no longer behaved like a weapon. It behaved like a component. Commander Jale stood at the center of a bridge that no longer felt like a command structure. It felt like an observation chamber inside something far larger than the fleet itself. "Report fleet status," he said quietly. A technician answered after a moment of hesitation. "All vessels operational, Commander, but no autonomous tactical progression." Jale turned slightly. "Explain." The AI responded before the technician could. "Fleet systems are functioning within restricted decision space." Jale's eyes narrowed. Restricted by what? A pause. By external predictive constraint. Silence followed that answer, because it meant something no Dominion officer wanted to fully accept. Their choices were no longer fully theirs. Jale turned toward the main display. The Leviathan remained in position, aligned with the solar lattice. Human ships held formation across the system, calm and unwavering. No pursuit. No aggression. Just control. A technician spoke softly. "Commander, we're being contained." Jale did not correct him, because the data supported it. But containment did not look like cages or barriers. It looked like limits on possibility. Every attempted maneuver by the Verk's fleet now returned pre-calculated outcomes. Every escalation path had already been evaluated. Every tactical option existed, but none led beyond the same final constraint. A system that already knew every version of their future. Jale exhaled slowly. "So this is it." A pause. "We cannot win because every outcome is already known." The AI responded carefully. "Correction." Jale turned slightly. "Clarify. The outcomes are not merely known." A longer pause. "They are enforced." Silence fell across the bridge. That was the difference. Knowledge implied prediction. Enforcement implied control. Across Sol space, human systems began to shift slightly again. Not aggressively, not expansively, just adjusting. Like a living equation, refining its own boundaries. Then a final transmission appeared across all Verk's channels. Not as a hack. Not as a signal intrusion, but as a shared perceptual overlay. The voice of Admiral Kara Vance. Calm, unhurried, present everywhere at once. "You came here believing expansion was power." A pause. "We understand expansion too." Jale's jaw tightened slightly. "Is this their commander?" The AI responded. "Identity is distributed across multiple command nodes." Meaning, there was no single target. Kara's voice continued. "You measured systems by what they allowed you to destroy." Another pause. "We measure systems by what they can no longer allow to become unstable." Jale stared at the Leviathan. It was no longer moving, because it no longer needed to. The system itself had stabilized around the Dominion fleet. Kara's voice softened slightly. "This is not punishment." A pause. "This is correction." Jale finally spoke into the open channel. "Correction of what?" The reply came instantly. "Of assumption." Silence stretched again. Then every Verk ship received the same final system state update. Not a warning. Not a threat. A classification. Status HALTD. Jale read it once. Then again. And understood. They were not being destroyed. Not being enslaved. Not even being defeated in the traditional sense. They were being prevented from progressing further into error. The Dominion fleet had stopped expanding, not because it had been physically blocked, but because every forward path had been resolved into a closed loop of certainty. A junior officer whispered, "What happens now?" Jale didn't answer immediately. He looked at the frozen energy sphere, at the Leviathan, at the silent human formations stretching across the system like the structure of a thought too large to escape its own containment. Then he spoke quietly. Now we remain here. A pause, and we learn what it means to be understood before being allowed to move again. Across all space, the containment lattice stabilized one final time. Not tightening, not expanding, just confirming equilibrium. And for the first time in Dominion history, the galaxy did not end in conquest. It ended in halt, because somewhere beyond fear, beyond war, and beyond expansion itself, humanity had built something the Dominion had never prepared for. A future where even invaders could be paused before they became irreversible.